Hey, welcome back. Another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast. Joined this week by Mike Triplett. We just finished watching minicamp, and we're going to kind of get into a lot of the stuff going on throughout the whole offseason, recapping what we saw, some of the biggest things that happened this offseason, and asking Mike why he disagrees that this is the biggest offseason in team history. What's going on with you?
Based on what we saw, I think Jarvis Landry is on pace to catch 175 passes.
I think that's fair.
My top observation.
Mike Thomas might have something to say about that, though. I don't know if he's going to let that one happen. But yeah, no, I think he's been probably one of the more standout players. And talking about standout people, if you are a business owner needing some guidance with your daily accounting, Daniel Sant CPA can help get your finances in order. They provide relevant accounting information, detailed analysis, and clear communication in a timely manner. Call today, 318-321-2765, or visit santcpa.com. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime Jones Act, which I still don't know what that is, hurricane and storm claims, you better call Bato at 504-323-4777 or 985-677-1085 for your free consultation and case review, batolaw.com. And check out our guys, Firehouse Subs, Veteran Boulevard location. Good people, do a lot in the community, and they got good food. So
that was amazing to watch. Just want to say,
yeah.
See that. I've heard it before.
Sure.
To watch it happen.
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, seeing greatness in progress is kind of something to behold. And look, honestly, joking aside, Jarvis really does look different than a lot of the guys they have out here. And I feel like the juxtaposition from last year to this year kind of really makes it pop. And my biggest takeaway from him has been not so much just how good he looks. I think he's making Jameis maybe a little bit better at some of his weaknesses, seeing some of those shorter passes. Yeah. Is he kind of been your highlight player so far?
Well, a couple of qualifiers before I say that. And you're right, not to shortchange Mike Thomas and make people start thinking, oh, he's going to be the one in this offense. How many of these have I done now? I did the math the other day, 18 of these. And without fail, I'm just as guilty as anyone else. We notice the receivers first. Sometimes we notice the DBs if they break up passes. But that's because nobody's in pads out there.
Right.
They're all in shorts, and they're rarely even doing a lot of full offense versus full defense. So you notice guys catching a lot of balls in 7-on-7. And, of course, the receiver's going to look good. So every year you would listen back to something like this, a receiver is probably going to be the standout. And Jarvis is also the standout because he's been here the whole time. Alvin just showed up this week. Mike Thomas hasn't been here. Olave's looked good too, but Jarvis is A, pass catcher, so he's going to get noticed. B, new, so he's going to get noticed. And he's been here for every one of these practices, so he's going to get noticed. But that being said, yeah, absolutely. The one thing that stood out more than anything else in the 2021 season is that they had nobody they could trust on a consistent basis to throw to. He looks like a guy you can trust. Some of the best, if you follow the Saints, Lance Moore, Willie Snead, even Emmanuel Sanders for 1 year. He fits that mold and might even be an upgrade over all of them. It certainly was in the peak of his career.
Look, I think legitimately, though, he does have the volume. It's not even just that he's been here. In the practices he's at, there's days where he has 3 and 4 catches and nobody else has more than one. And we're watching practices where there's a totality of maybe 11 passes to the first team offense. The last practice, there were 6 passes total caught the whole day through everybody. Jarvis had one of the touchdowns.
Yeah.
I'm excited about the things he can do, though. He's getting open quickly. He gets open in a manner in which, Jameis sees him quickly. Yep. Jameis already trusts him. And like I said, a lot of this stuff it's slants. It's crossing routes over the middle. He did not throw those last year.
Right.
And, throughout his career, that's really not been his forte. And he's talked to us a lot about, during the rehab process, he had to throw short passes, had to work on his accuracy, couldn't go down the field. And I think maybe marrying that, and again, it's early, qualify all this with, this could all end up being a bunch of,
we'll see.
Smoke. Yeah. But it looks like
Deontay Hardy's going to be he's going to lead the team in targets this year, even though they have all these other guys. But no, you're right. And look, that is going to be the thing we're going to put Jameis under a microscope all training camp and all preseason. Because it's a huge question. I think if they would have had an offseason where they added Jarvis Landry and got Michael Thomas back and have Alvin Kamara when they had Drew in his prime, or even when they had Teddy Bridgewater, we'd be like, God, those are the perfect weapons.
Right.
But we do have to wonder, that is not the type of weapon that Jameis Winston – I think Jameis Winston could be a very good quarterback in the NFL, but that is not the type – you're right. Slants, crossing, running backs out of the backfield. And it's the first thing he said. The very first Zoom conference we had with him after he signed, he says the number one thing he's working on is intermediate accuracy. And that's the thing. His completion percentage is not great, but it's not just because he's bad at throwing the football. It's because he throws low percentage passes. He likes to look down the field.
Yeah,
and so it's not that he misses those guys. It's just not the passes he looks for. But now that he's working with Jarvis and Alvin and Michael Thomas, and he's in this offense, that's going to be the part of his game we're going to be most curious to see how much it's developed.
Yeah, really, that's a great point, too, because 59% could easily become 64, 65, 66%.
He's throwing 12 passes to
he's throwing
those
3-yard
guys,
passes to him. Yeah, no, absolutely. That number goes way up. The one thing I didn't see from Jameis that I wanted to see, I liked the going over the middle. There was a lot more of that. Still didn't really get the ball out to the running backs out of the backfield. And I don't know if that's ever really going to be a part of his game. And he talked a lot last year, him and Alvin trying to get on the same page. They eventually did against Seattle. Then the next week he gets hurt. I think now, for me, Jameis going forward, that's the biggest question mark. Can he do it? Can he do it with consistency?
He knows.
Can he,
can
he change the way he looks at the field? It's a huge thing that he needs to figure out. But what did you think of his?
Well, he did have the one. It was funny because it was the first day we saw Alvin, or that wheel route in 7-on-7.
But that's up the field. It's not. He's
still up the field.
He's not looking.
That
flat
works
to
too.
his left.
That works too. But yeah, I mean, just seeing him in general. I mean, I kept rechecking my math. It's not only 7 months, is it? It's only 7 months, and he looked. Obviously he's not rolling out, and then they did very few team sessions, and when they did, they took him out and they put Dalton in. But just such a positive sign that he's back doing as much as he is already. And look, I mean, just the contract the team signed him to, I think they've been confident in what they've heard from doctors and everything too. So we almost forget that he's one of the injury question marks on this team. I almost don't think he is, but obviously coming off a torn ACL, he is a little bit, but that's all positive. Which allows him to sort of pick up with the positive things we saw him start to do last season. I mean, if only we could go back in time and have him play out a 17-game season, I wonder how much more confidence there would be in him right now. But everything was trending in mostly the right direction.
Yeah, along with the stuff like the passes to the flat, I don't know if that's ever going to be his game where he's quickly looking, because he knows he can throw the ball down the field and he can attack, and the longer a play develops, that's more time to get the ball down the field, whereas with like a Drew Brees or a Teddy Bridgewater, that's panic and get it out, because how far can you actually throw the ball down the field?
Well, and those throws are more effective. That's the big thing that I've noticed from watching Drew, and like I said, pretty much everyone else who's ever run this offense, even his backups when they've been in, versus Jameis is, when Jameis does throw, it's his fourth or fifth option. It's like his, I guess I have to settle for this.
Right.
He's not looking for that as a first read. So I'm very curious to see if he'll make slants and passes to the running back a first read, in rhythm, in stride, as the play is designed. That's what we're talking about, not the reluctant check down.
Right. I think he can, and I think we will see more of it. And I think you have to. You got to play to the strength of your roster, and he knows. And look, he also knows that he's on these short-term contracts and getting 59% to 66, 67. I don't think he's playing thinking about money, but those are money numbers that people look at, even though they might be overrated a little bit for all the reasons you just pointed out. Overall, though, how do you feel about what you saw from him? Are you any more confident in him right now, than you were maybe 6 months ago, or even going back to last year? Have you seen anything that maybe changes your opinion of what you expect?
I mean, if he's got Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, and first of all, he's going to love Chris Olave. This is I have a feeling that once we get a week into training camp or the preseason, my pre-prediction is that Chris Olave's fantasy stock is going to rise and rise, because he's going to be that downfield playmaker that Jameis wants to hit and will hit a few times. But just having those guys around him is what makes me more confident in him. I don't know that we saw enough in minicamp or OTAs to say I saw him doing things that make me more confident in him. But you are right. We saw a lot more shorter passes. I mean, I remember his first training camp. It felt like 1 out of every 3, if not more, throws were deep down the field. Like, that's his favorite pass. And they shouldn't take that away from him either. I mean, boy, oh boy, did they miss those 14 touchdown passes he threw for the rest of the season after he was gone last year, when they couldn't put points on the board at all with the other quarterbacks they had. And it was funny that Jarvis Landry, who we're painting as this possession receiver guy, he had this big smile on his face in his first Zoom call. And I think I followed up and asked him, why'd you smile like that? And he said, Jameis, he goes, because Jameis is going to throw the ball to you. He's like, there's going to be big play opportunity. Like, players like playing with him because they know that he's not afraid to throw that, to let the receiver win down the field. And he's got more weapons to do that with now.
So looking at everything else on the offense, I feel pretty good about everything that got going on. We talk a lot about, like, the pressure points of the team. For me, I think the 2 pressure points became even more obvious through these 6 practices that we watched. And there's only so much you can see on the offensive line, but the fact that Trevor Penning's behind James Hurst, and we know what James Hurst is, that's one spot where I feel like things could maybe fall apart a little bit for them. My other one still remains tight end, and I don't think we saw anything at all these 6 practices that makes me feel better or worse about the position. I think I'm just not noticing it at all, and that's kind of the problem, that they don't have anyone there. Now, Taysom Hills working out in the back room today. We saw him. I actually saw him, like, walking down a hallway, which is like, okay, he's moving at least, so I think that's a positive sign. I think he'll help there. But I still don't have any confidence in that position. And I feel like if they could just get Adam Troutman to, like, a 6.5 out of 10 player consistently every single week, that's all they really need from it. But I don't know that we saw anything yet.
I don't. I'm sort of. I think the position is going to be an afterthought as far as playmakers go.
Yeah.
I think it was a bigger concern last year because they didn't have any receivers they could trust or tight ends they could trust in the passing game. But now that we've talked about the depth of receiver, and oh, by the way, Traquan Smith, Marquez Callaway, and Deontay Hardy as your 4, 5, and 6, there are a lot of receivers and running backs you can throw the ball to. So I don't think any of those guys needs to even be a 50-catch guy. And I absolutely have trust in Troutman's blocking ability. I have trust in Nick Van Et's blocking ability. So they've got professionals at tight end. That's just not where their plays are going to come from. I don't think.
They probably won't use a lot of
it would have had
sets.
But to get better at that position, it would have had to have been a significant – like if they hadn't gone for Jarvis Landry, but they had instead signed – I don't even remember who was out there. I feel like everybody got franchised. There were some big names at tight end available at one point, but they didn't just need a body there. There's room to upgrade to like a top pass catcher in this league, but that's just not going to be a top pass catching position for them.
It's not, and I don't want to like downgrade Adam Troutman here. I just feel like it needs to be consistent. Like there were too many drop passes. There were some of those bad fumbles last year. It just needs to be like a competent level of play every single week. I think he can provide that. We've seen it at levels, but like he just needs to get more consistent. But to your point, I don't think there's going to be like a lot of 2 tight end sets this year. And I think maybe the most interesting thing about going from Sean Payton to Pete Carmichael, you look at their history of 11 personnel, the first time ever from 06, probably in franchise history, they exceeded 50% of their snaps with 3 receivers on the field, 2012 when Pete was there. And that number held for like a really long time until Willie Snead, Mike Thomas, and Brandon Cooks were on the same team. So that might just be his forte, period, is that he likes to go receiver heavy.
I could be making this up, and so I probably shouldn't even bring it up, but I swear there was one time where, everybody's always thought Sean Payton is crazy mad scientist guy, but I think even Sean Payton said one time more that, like, Pete's the one who wants to throw it all the time, and Payton's the one who has to rein Pete in. I could be making that, but I do think, everybody always just assumes that Sean they threw it a million times the year that Pete was calling plays. Of course, they had the worst defense in NFL history.
True. But just the way they went about designing their offense, I think if that's Pete's, and we don't know enough about Pete really like running the show to know what he likes to do, what he doesn't like to do. And I think he probably has a lot of the same DNA as Sean, but that might be kind of the one way he likes to have receivers on the field maybe, and it makes sense. And
it will make sense around this quarterback.
Yeah.
I was talking to Pete a week ago, and I say, like when people ask me, is it going to be the same Saints offense? I said, there's not even really such thing as a same Saints offense. I mean, there was for a while, but we've got the 5,500-yard passing Drew Brees years, but then we had the Drew Brees getting older and starting to complete 75% of his passes Drew Brees years. And then there was the Teddy year. Then there was the Taysom, and now there's Jameis, and they've become more run-heavy. I mean, they've evolved so much just in the last 4 or 5 years that there's nothing that is like a signature necessarily that can't be changed.
Yeah, Sean actually even told me one time that their offense evolves with the type of tight ends they have, and that kind of dictates what they do. And when they have good tight ends, they do different things. And when they have bad tight ends, they do different things. And it's just really, they're going to cater to their personnel. And the personnel dictates that it's wide receivers. There's really not a need to force anything. I think they're fine without the great tight end. But You do need, like, when you throw to him, he can't, like, make a crazy
He has
fumble.
to catch it.
Yeah, he just needs to realize his potential. And look, I think Troutman still has a chance too.
I do too.
Like him and Ruiz, and I don't want to make excuses for him because it is show and prove time, and they got to do
all
it.
they can do is go up though, and they were thought of highly for a reason. I don't think either of those guys, and certainly not Peyton Turner, I don't think any of those guys has gone bust yet.
No.
I don't think you give up on any of those guys, but you also can't count on any of them and say, well, this is obviously going to break out year for both of them. But there's only one direction they can both go.
And what people don't realize is these practices, OTAs, and minicamp, they start over at the fundamentals every year. This is how you do a pass set. This is how you block. This is how you do this. This is how you get set for the play inline tight end. And those two guys didn't have
They've never
any
had
of that.
one before,
and
yeah.
they both look like they need it. Like Troutman's coming from Dayton, but like there's stuff that he's
was
going to do in the NFL that.
It's kind of a cheap shot right there.
But look, it's a small school. He isn't getting Ohio State coaching. You know, he's getting Dayton coaching, and it's not guys that have NFL ties there. Like, it's a small school against lesser competition, and you know, Doug Marrone is a tactician. Him being around Ruiz, starting over at the beginning, and Ruiz talked about that. Like, he needs the fundamental training, and whereas like maybe Ryan Ramczak's getting bored with some of the stuff Marrone's having him do, Ruiz is starting from zero and being built back up, and he feels more confident about what he's doing. And again, they got to show and prove. Like,
well, since you mentioned the offensive line, when you were talking about pressure points, that's the number one for me. I don't think the offensive line is going to be a weakness at all. But I used to make my Saints prediction each year thinking this team's going to win at least 11 games because they got the best offensive line in the NFL, or a top 3 offensive line. That offensive line has now become a question mark.
they had the best offensive line in the NFL because Drew was throwing the ball in like 2.1 seconds.
But they also had excellent players.
They did.
I mean,
they did.
especially at the 2 tackle positions. But now that Ruiz has become a question mark, now that there's a question mark at left tackle, and they obviously have to stay healthy. That is what destroyed this team, though, last year, is when both tackles were missing, it didn't matter what quarterback was playing. Nobody could move the ball last year. So my question is this offensive line the 15th best in the NFL, or can it be top 5 again? And I think that can make or break whether they're competing for, barely making the playoffs or possibly being in the NFC Championship game.
I think part of the answer to that, I don't think they'll be top 5, but like being between, say, 7 and 15, I think a lot of that has to do with Jameis too. And if he is able to get the ball out quickly, Mike Thomas, Jarvis Landry, they're making these quick plays. They can get quick game going. They don't have to block as long. If everything's slow developing down the field, I think then that's where you start to give up a little bit more pressure. So, Drew, the joke aside, like he really did do a lot to protect those guys. And if they were maybe the 6th most talented offensive line, when you're getting rid of the ball that quick every single play and nothing is down the field, you aren't giving up pressures then. But if plays are taking 3.5, 4 seconds, that starts to be more on the quarterback than your offensive line. So, overall, it's tough. Like, I don't know if Hurst elevates you to that level. I think he's fine. Ruiz just has to be okay. I think Ruiz taking so long to develop has put more pressure on Eric McCoy. I thought his rookie season was probably his best one, and there's been a little bit more stuff because I think he has to try to overcompensate. Ramczyk being hurt last year was a big deal. So if you get like yeses on the 3, Pete just being Pete, I know people hate him, but they missed him last year too.
They missed him bad last year.
You look at the run numbers of the left side of the field, like they were
that's
putrid.
That's what dropped off the most too. Yeah, I mean you made a great point about Jameis, but it's the last 4 or 5 years this team could just choose to have a game where they're just going to run everyone over. And actually the first game of last season, they did it against Green Bay. They went into Jacksonville and they would have run for the clock didn't stop them. They would have just they'd still be running all over Green Bay in that game, and that's something they lost with those injuries last year.
Have we underrated the loss of Armstead? It kind of feels like everybody kind of moved beyond it quicker than maybe it should have happened.
No, and look, I think when people don't when people don't understand why like Vegas has such a low number for the Saints and why people are all predicting the Saints won't make the playoffs, I think that's a big reason. They lose Sean Payton. But also, I think Teron Armstead was rated as the number 1 free agent. I know he was by ESPN, but I think he was by many publications. And so when you're on the outside looking in, you're like, so they lost their coach and the number 1 free agent in the NFL? They're obviously going to take a step back. So I think that's the working assumption. And I think we're probably being a little generous, but unfortunately, we've seen them be able to replace Teron Armstead before because they've had to for stretches, and James Hurst has been one of the guys doing it. But James Hurst has to be your 5th guy.
Right.
James Hurst can't be the second best offensive lineman because you're missing 3 starters at once.
Yeah, they can't have 2 weak points on that offensive line. Like Ruiz has to be better. He has to just be. He doesn't have to be the Pro Bowl type guard that I think they were expecting they were getting when they drafted him in the first round.
That would help though. That'd be nice.
It would, but he just needs to be solid. If he can be solid, and then Hurst can be solid, I think the other pieces come together. The same question too. Like, what's your concern level post Sean Payton? Like,
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know how to rate that. I mean, look, the one example, there's negative examples all over the place, but the one positive example, when the Saints went to the Super Bowl, that was Jim Caldwell they were facing, not Tony Dungy, and that team started out 15-0, I think, at least 14-0. That's the dream, is that it's a seamless transition. And we've talked a lot about how Dennis Allen is not changing things just for change's sake, and the players appreciate that. And then I can already hear it. If they're 1-3, everybody's going to be like, oh, they're just trying to do everything the same way Sean Payton did. But I think of examples like that, and I know there are others that aren't coming to the top of my mind.
How many times have you used that Caldwell-Dungy line? That was a good line.
Well, that's one I thought in my head. George Seifert for Bill Walsh is another good one. But like the Caldwell is the one I keep coming back to, where it's just like, it's okay to be the exact same team and all you did was replace the head coach. You can still be good under that formula. But it's I mean, there's a reason why if Sean Payton said I'm coming back to coaching, like 18 teams will get in a bidding war over him, including the Saints. He's great. He's proven. And you just can't I mean, is that a 1-win difference? Is that a 2-win difference? Is it a 5-win difference? It's impossible to know. It really is.
Well, it's apparently $25 million price tag right now for him. So, but I think us here, like we probably feel more confident. Like using Vegas as a barometer, we probably feel more confident about DA than I think most people outside here. And I think we're probably more likely to be right than wrong. I think the people that think he's going to be Oakland and it's going to be a disaster, I don't think those people have really been paying attention. Like the defense has been good for a long time. It's organized.
Frankly, the strength of this team for a couple years now.
Yeah, but at least 3, and it's going to continue to be. And I think the staff is good. I think the continuity is smart. I think Pete Carmichael's going to be good.
I think that was just as important with the hire. If you didn't pick DA, are you also losing Chris Richard and Ryan Nielsen and Michael Hodges and maybe Pete Carmichael as your offensive coordinator? I think every one of those is an outstanding hire in all those positions. So that total package that came along with DA, I wouldn't have wanted to lose a single one of those guys. The one upgrade they really made was Doug Marrone, and that could potentially be really good too, especially since we're saying Trevor Penning and Cesar Ruiz are 2 of the players on the roster who probably need the coaching the most. But back to the point about Dennis Allen, when he had to replace Sean Payton for a game last year, and they went to Tampa Bay and they won 9-0. Nobody batted an eye at that. We were all like, of course he can do that for a week. And nobody would question their decision to have him be the guy doing it. So the question is, if you're that confident that he can do that for a week, like, can he do it permanently? That's a question. It's sort of an impossible question to answer. Because usually when a coach like that gets replaced, it's because the team is doing bad, not because you want to keep things the way they are.
My concern DA to Sean, like I think there'll be a lot of continuity. The schemes will all work and all that. It becomes the attention to detail, the level of pressure that Sean brought. Sean had everybody on edge, and it was a good thing. And like I've heard stories about like there's a bucket in the locker room. He wanted a certain number of Sharpies in there, and he'd sometimes catch them without a certain number of Sharpies, and like there was hell to pay over stuff like that. And I think people just kind of having that edge and that standard and knowing they have to adhere to it and strive for it every single day probably is the difference between a win or 2 per season. But that doesn't mean DA can't bring it in his own way and keep that level of intensity.
Well, I actually was talking to somebody who said the thing that has stood out, because he hasn't changed a lot, but they said there is more attention to detail. Because under Sean, there was a little bit more of the, we know how everything's done because we've been doing it. But with DA, he's sort of making sure, like meeting times, maybe they did start at 8:02 and now they're like,
well, the press conferences start on time now, so that's
starting at 8 o'clock.
we haven't been on hold for 45 minutes wondering what the hell's going on.
That'll still happen.
You think so? I hope not. I hope not. So going on the defensive side of the ball, I think we're seeing a lot of the stuff we expect. Haven't seen a lot from the safeties at this point. I think the secondary overall looks pretty good, though, even with some of the backup guys showing up in there. Standout player for me, and I think you're probably going to have the same one because there's really only one guy that probably has really flashed that you weren't looking for. But I think Bryce Thompson's like maybe a good player,
especially on this last practice day when we're recording.
3 PBUs today, yeah.
And the team was going nuts for him too.
Yeah.
Like even the defensive linemen were jumping on the sideline, like cheering him on. Yeah. So except for as of the time of this recording, I don't know when you're posting it. I have a 53-man roster due, and I haven't started like actually trying to do
Bryce going to be on there
crunching. I have a feeling I'm going to want to put 14 DBs on it.
It's going to be a lot.
Like, I mean, I've already seen how much they're using Daniel Sorensen. I've already seen Smoke Monday getting a lot of play, like, and he was one of their top free agents. Who's the other one that I was? Justin Evans. Who
Thompson's. I feel like Thompson's ahead of him.
I know, but like all of a sudden, I need to do the math, but I have a feeling there's going to be like 14 guys that I would normally consider putting on.
Well, because I think JT Gray and Sorensen are going to make it just strictly special teams, and then your top safeties, there's 3 are locked. You count Chauncey in there, there's 4. If you throw Thompson in there, there's 5. So it's potentially 7 safeties making the team, and then your cornerbacks.
Did you say P.J. Williams? Are you including him in that?
Top 3, yeah.
And then Alontae Taylor adds to the mix at cornerback.
Alontae Taylor, Marshawn, Paulson Adebo, Bradley Roby, so like 11 to 12 DBs. But they're moving that way anyhow.
Yeah.
You see them doing a lot of dime stuff out here at these practices.
Well, and
6
if
DBs
they don't
on the field.
re-sign Quan, then there's that's almost he was almost playing an extra DB position. But safety is one of those questions for me that I think on paper, Marcus Williams and Malcolm Jenkins, Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May, that's not a huge drop-off, but it's just so different. I mean,
it is.
Marcus Williams, I think, almost got noticed for the rare mistake he made every once in a while over the last years than for, like, being a dynamic playmaker. I mean, obviously he wasn't necessarily the ball hawk that people expected when he first came out of college, but he was such an eraser back there. I mean, we talked about them being one of the probably top 2 or 3 defenses in the league over a 3-year stretch, and I think a lot of that was
coincides with his arrival.
They just trusted that their back end was covered, and I don't know who's going to do that for them, because I think Tyrann Mathieu is going to want to play close. You know, he's going to make more plays. He's going to have more special moments, but he's going to play closer to the line of scrimmage. Marcus May is not just going to be a deep free safety for this team. They're going to be more interchangeable. So I wonder if some of the things that they're gaining with those guys, they're going to, lose at the expense of giving up some more big plays. We're not going to know that until the season starts, but that's a big question mark. It's a lot of changes at one position.
I think we're going to see a completely different defensive scheme this year. Last year, their top coverage was cover 1, and that's man coverage underneath. Marcus Williams playing deep, and he's patrolling the deep part of the field. You simply don't have the personnel to play that style of football. So I think we're going to probably see more of the 2-man, which we've seen an uptick of. They've played a lot of quarters coverage, which kind of has 2 guys back there. And I think we've seen some cover 3 out here at this camp. And
Chris Richard.
Yeah. And there's a lot of ways to disguise that where you want one guy dropping or one guy coming forward. Yeah. So you can start out showing a 2-safety shell.
With those
guys, and maybe Marcus May goes deep one snap, and the next time it's Tyrann. But I think we're going to see that cover 1 number come down quite a bit. I mean, they'll still use it and employ it, but it's not going to be. Look, it's just like on offense. You play to your personnel. Like, you don't have this guy with this world-class range, and you can't lean on it and make that your defensive identity, so you do it differently. And they might not be better, they might not be worse, but I do think this group can be more dynamic, and I think they can do a lot more to disguise, because Marcus came down sometimes last year, but you aren't really – it's not as believable. He's not going to make as many plays. Like, these 2 are kind of authentic in their roles.
I think there'll be more big plays, and there'll probably be more I don't want to say mistakes, but something –
yeah, more deep passes given up. Yeah, probably more explosives. Yeah, for sure. All right, so they had a really good offseason.
All right, here we go.
They signed a lot of exciting players. We've been fighting about this behind the scenes with Alex Restrepo as well. Me and Alex think this has been the most exciting Saints offseason since 2006, the arrival of Sean Payton and Drew Brees. You are vehemently.
Yeah, I think you guys are judging it wrong. I think from, let's call April 1st the dividing line. I think everything that happened after April 1st has been the most exciting stretch of any offseason.
Oh, so we're gonna get technical
because things were low though. Things were low. They lost Teron Armstead. They lost Marcus Williams. Yeah. They lost Sean Payton.
That's what made the sun coming out feel a little bit brighter.
They had some quarterback flirtations before they that were pretty polarizing before and looked a little desperate, frankly, before they were like, all right, I guess we'll stick with Jameis Winston. Things were at their and they didn't sign anybody except for Marcus May. So things were so low that when they traded for the extra first-round pick, got Chris Olave, the one everyone wanted, signed Tyrann Mathieu, signed Jarvis Landry. Of course, it was fireworks, New Year's Day, the 4th of July. It was everything. I agree with you completely. But this offseason is still the offseason where they lost Sean Payton and lost Teron Armstead and lost Marcus
It's
Williams.
sort of like the Friday the 13th series. You don't acknowledge the first movie that Jason wasn't in. So everything that happened before Jason showed up, Jason showing up is Tyrann Mathieu. So everything from there forward was really good. But no,
it was funny, and I'm not saying he's the ultimate authority on it, but Bill Barnwell just did a ranking of the top 32. He ranked off seasons 1 to 32. He had the Saints as the 29th best off season in the NFL. But that's kind of how it's looked. I mean, they lost Sean Payton.
Yeah, that's fair.
Offseason,
no, it's definitely fair. And Teron's a huge loss
is a
too,
huge one. So
Marcus Williams is a huge loss.
But yes, of course. So that's my counter argument. But of course, I think, frankly, I mean, this is so anecdotal, but I was talking to people this spring, at my kids' football games. They're like, I don't know if I'm going to re-up my season tickets. I mean, there was a little bit of
for sure.
apathy going on with this fan base, and everything they've done since then, obviously, has been that they're the comeback offseason of the year. How about that?
That's fair. Look, it's funny though because they took so long to get involved, but if they had signed Tyrann and Jarvis during day one of the free agency, those would have been good signings, and people would have been extremely excited. And I think kind of the value that you got Jarvis at particularly makes the offseason even better. $3 million for him
it's crazy.
Is out of this world. And you look
Tyrann was a bargain too.
Yeah. They almost paid $10 million for Valdez-Scantling. You got Jarvis for $3 million. And look, the worst person, the person most affected, I think, by the Jarvis signing is probably Deontay Hardy because he's trying to negotiate a contract. Him and the Saints, as I've been told, aren't close at all. There's a gulf of distance between them. And he's looking at the market, as he should, that just exploded.
Yeah.
And the Saints have this guy sitting here that's an outstanding player, tearing up camp, and they're paying him $3 million. How do you overcome that? But I don't know.
Jameis is going to be Deontay's best friend.
Yeah, he will be. He will be.
Deontay's going to put up classic Devery Henderson numbers, 32 catches for 780 yards.
The Joe Morgan season where he averaged 33 yards of reception.
Oh no, it was way more than that. It was 10 for 460 or something like that. I think it was his whole season. 10 catches for
Going into training camp, is there any one major burning question, issue, anything that you want to see addressed that you didn't necessarily see addressed yet?
Well, yeah, we didn't see the team yet.
Yeah,
I mean,
fair.
It's more than one, and injuries. I've never, everyone's gonna always talk about injuries. Last year was as bad as it's ever been. It's funny. I keep using the stat, and everybody keeps using the stat that they set the NFL record for most starters used in a season. I think it was 58. And that number does not include Michael Thomas or Will Lutz.
Yeah.
Because they started 0 games.
Yeah.
Frankly, I think the reason we're optimistic about this team is even if you told me you get Michael Thomas back for 50 catches, much less 100, even if Will Lutz makes 3 more field goals that the other guys missed last year, if the offensive line is even 25% more healthy than last year, Marcus Davenport comes back and plays more than 11 games. Peyton Turner plays more than whatever he played last year. It can only be David Onyemata playing way more than he played last year when it's just almost a completely lost season. But unfortunately, you're not positive you're getting any of that.
Right.
Marcus Davenport is unfortunately still a big injury question mark. Michael Thomas is unfortunately still a big injury question mark. Jameis Winston to some extent is an injury question mark. Marcus May to some extent. So I think there's a chance for everybody to be super high on this team just 2 weeks into the preseason, but we haven't seen it yet. So we need to see it first.
Davenport's the most fascinating situation on the team to me right now, and that has nothing to do with him cutting off half of his finger.
That adds to it for me. That's a first. That's a first. I've never gone in the locker room and been like, oh, so what have you been up to this offseason? And they show you their missing finger.
Look, but for real, though, he's somebody that I think his talent says he should be paid at the top of the league, but his availability says he shouldn't get paid at all, and I have no idea where that's going to register. I don't know if him having one healthy season gets him paid to where he wants to be, or if the history of it is – to a point where it's so far back. I think they have to let him absolutely hit the market, go out, test it, see what's out there, let him come back, and then match it if you want to. But I don't think you can be the team that makes that decision because it's just so variable.
What's interesting with him is, so we have a couple good case studies on this. We have Teron Armstead. They let him go because if you're closer to the situation, you probably lean a little more to that negative side, especially when they're with their tight spending.
They would have paid him, though, if the number was comfortable.
They would have, but what I'm saying is another team will be like, I don't care. We've got money, and we're desperate. We'll pay for the gamble. And the Saints let the gamble go. Same thing with Trey Hendrickson the year before. Not a health gamble, but was that 1 year just a fluke gamble? The Saints can't afford to gamble with these contracts.
That's where their cap
and
hurts.
And if Marcus Davenport becomes a gamble, this cap is going up and up and up and up. There are, unfortunately, teams out there. I mean, look at the contracts we saw this offseason, like at receiver. There is a team that will, if Marcus Davenport has another season like he just had last year, somebody will probably pay him $18 million a year for the upside. And the Saints can't afford to pay for just upside. But obviously the best case scenario is that you get 15 games of Marcus Davenport at the rate, 9 sacks in 11 games last year. Finally, really started to come
He was
together.
amazing
when
last
he
year.
was on the field,
he was
probably their best defensive player on the
DA
field.
said he was last year, that he was their best player. And he doesn't say stuff like that too often, and he was comfortable repeating it multiple times that he was their most talented player, their best player.
Until Cam's last 6 weeks, when all of a sudden it was like, holy.
It's unbelievable. Well, everybody got healthy, though, and he got going. Yeah, the best case scenario is you get 15 games of Davenport and Peyton Turner also shows up and plays and shows his potential, because that makes that decision a little bit easier. But overall, I don't think you can be the team to figure that out. I think a lot of their contract decisions are guys that I frankly would let them go test the market and find out. I don't know if they're going to overextend. I don't think they're going to have any of those issues right now, though. I don't think anyone's going to force them. So we'll end on this, though. CJ yesterday was very upset that people were saying they're an 8-win team.
Oh, gosh, I don't know. Who was he talking about, Vegas?
What are they? They're 8.5, right?
They might. Well, you know what? I think they went up after the Jarvis signing. They were at 7.5 at one point.
Okay, all right. So where are you at on it with the 8 wins? What's kind of your prediction
I'm
for
taking
the season?
the over on that. Like,
okay.
I think people.
What about on 9?
My pick is 10-7. Now, at a certain point, you know, Vegas's numbers are always low for every single team. Even the teams that we feel great about, I think they never go above like 11.5 on anybody, because they know that they're going to win way more unders than they're going to win overs, because teams get hurt and teams collapse and everything like that. But no, I mean, I feel really comfortable with a 10-win prediction for the Saints. If I went any direction, I would go up to 11, but they're going to have to earn that, I think. But I all the things we said that you can pick apart, they were a legitimate 9-win team last year that probably should have been an 11-win team, and I don't see why they're going to be worse this year. If anything, I think they can only be better. And the NFC and the NFC South did not get better either.
Yeah.
I don't love the schedule. Like, some of the things they're going to have to overcome with the schedule, but that changes so drastically from year to year that can't affect your record prediction.
I've been at 10 and 11. They got on me pretty hard for 10. They signed Jarvis. I went up to 11. I feel good in that range. 10.5 is probably the right number. A few things go right, it can go up. A few things go wrong, you can slide backwards. But that's all I got for you, man. I appreciate you coming on. And follow Mike's work on ESPN. He's on Twitter at Mike Triplett. And keep it locked with us on NewOrleans.Football for everything else.